And we are live in the Storycraft Cafe. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. I am your story barista, Hank Garner. Um, and
Make
I
mine a
am
double
joined
half latte, please. Shh.
coming right up, coming right up. I am so happy tonight to be joined by three friends who are going to go through this revision process with me and with all of you by extension. Uh, and I'm going by the way my screen is laid out, everybody else's is probably different. But Keo is one of our chief writing wranglers in the Storycraft Cafe, an ever present presence in the cafe. And we're so happy to have her join us. And Josh Hayes, who was with us in the last challenge, been a good friend of mine for a bunch of years. And he is in the middle of a trilogy. And I thought it would be fun to have Josh kind of talk through where he is and how all of that's coming to life. And then Rick Partlow, the machine, who is, it's the middle of February, and I think he's on his eighth novel this year.
Not quite.
Oh my God.
No, that's just some inside ribbing that we love to give Rick. But Rick is always in the writing or revising process, and a lot of times some of each. So I thought he would be a valuable voice to help us through some of this process. So welcome, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having
Thank
me
you.
back.
Absolutely. Josh, let's start with you. When we finished our challenge back in the fall, you had finished book one in the trilogy. You were drafting book two of the trilogy, and you had spent some time working on your overall plan and all that good stuff. And when we finished the challenge, I think you were about halfway into your draft. Do I remember that right?
I was probably a third. I am a halfway
Okay.
now. I had some issues with the beginning of the book that I needed to rework, and that took a little bit of time. But I am halfway through. I'm about 65,000 words into book two. Um, but this is actually a great challenge for me because I am I f- in writing book two, I found a huge plot hole in book one.
Interesting.
And so I've had to stop work on book two to go back and fix book one. And so I've been doing a lot of rewrites on book one and going back through one of the significant plot threads to fix it and make sure that it's lined up with where I need it to be, which is what I've been doing for the last couple of weeks. So that's kind of generally where I sit right now. Book one is finished. The draft is finished. I've got, I don't know, 3, 4 more of the chapters that are directly connected to that plot thread to rework and rewrite.
Yeah.
And then the rest of it is just kind of putting the rest of the novel together and just kind of basic editing and little small rewrites here and there. And then I'll be smashing book two again. So
Nice. So when you found out what you did in book two that you realized that book one needed to change, that's probably a moment where you were super happy you had not published book one yet.
100%. Holy crap. Yes. Well, basically what happened is there's events that happen off screen, as it were, in book one that force book one to happen, right? And so in my mind, I thought that I understood those events.
Yeah.
But as I go through book two and those events are starting to come to light, I figured out that I really hadn't fleshed any of that out. I hadn't done any of the legwork for the backstory because I didn't need it, because I knew that something happened and I was
Yeah.
just like, okay, this happened. I'll figure it out later. This is a problem for future Josh. Well, now future Josh is present Josh, and present Josh is pissed at future Josh for
It's
the
like
stuff
time
that he did.
travel.
Yeah, it's like past Josh messed up future Josh, which became present Josh, and now past Josh is in trouble. So
You need to
I
find some photos of yourself in high school to make sure you're not disappearing.
yeah, playing a guitar somewhere. But yeah, no, I I basically was writing a chapter that had to deal directly with what happened in those events.
Yeah.
And so I went back to book 1 to make sure that I hadn't, like, I wasn't conflicting anything. And when I went back and looked at book 1, I realized that this plot thread that I wrote for one of the main characters was backwards, and that he had done a lot of things that he shouldn't have done yet in the book, but also because he did those things, it ruined all the rest of it. So,
Mm.
um, I figured out I figured out the thing that I needed to figure out, but in
Yeah.
doing that, I found the plot hole. And now I'm just filling in that hole with dirt, basically. And that takes a little bit of time, obviously. And I'm kind of a slow writer, as I can nail out 3 grand in a day, but um when I go back and edit, I'm very particular about a lot of writers are precious about their words in a sense
Yeah.
of like if they write it, it's got to stay, or all that stuff. I'm precious about just having the right words. And so when I go back and do like self edits and rewrites, if the words aren't correct, then I have to change them. And so that's basically what I'm in the middle of doing right now. And in the middle of that, there are conversations that happen that shouldn't have happened. And so I've got to
Mm.
rework the conversations that are happening in those scenes to reflect all of that stuff. Sam said, how many people end up dying? A lot of people die. I kill everyone. That's my speciality.
Everyone.
Everyone dies.
Everyone. Uh, there you are, Keo.
Technology, gotta love it.
Gotta love it.
Love it. Gotta love it. Josh, we're gonna come back in a minute and talk a little bit through
Okay.
what that's looking like for you. But Keo, what are you working on? Do you have something that you're um about to start revising on, or what is your process looking like right now?
Oh geez, what don't I have to revise? So many.
Yeah.
My current project is actually me trying to expand a short story I wrote back in college several years ago. It is based off of a Greek mythology named
Nice.
Pygmalion. And because, I'm chaotic and like to torture myself, it's going to have a magic system.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Now, have you planned out this magic system?
No.
No.
I love it.
I
So
want to say yes, but the honest answer is no.
yeah, a chaotic magic system. So do you have a plan for taking this kind of big idea concept that you have
Oh
and
yeah, I'm going to stare at my words and then hope it, writes itself.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've had that same plan before, and sometimes
Yeah,
it's
and then
worked.
I'm just going to give up and actually write it because we both know that's just,
Yeah,
the hope's in vain.
I hear you. I hear you. So do you have a working first draft?
Oh yeah.
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 Gotcha. Okay. All right. Rick Partlow, what are you working on these days? I saw you
I
posted on
am.
Facebook a while back that you had just summed up a book and had, have you started on another?
Yeah, I'm working on book 1 in a new series right now. Um, started. I guess it was Sunday,
Okay.
Saturday or Sunday. I can't remember. And I hope to have it done by like mid March ish, maybe before. Um, and then I'll start working on the next one.
When you because you have a couple of long running series, when you start a brand new series, um is your process well, obviously your process is different because you have a blank slate and you have no rules that you've set for yourself that you have to abide by, and there are no worlds already built and that sort of thing. What's your process like for starting something brand new as opposed to picking up in one of your other series?
Well, I'm a pretty in-depth outliner, and usually the outline for book one is a lot longer than any of the others. I mean, it's for example, like I just did. I finished Drop Trooper book 12 a month ago or something. I forget.
Hmm.
Um, and the outline for that was really short. It was like maybe 6,000 words. Because I know the world, I know the characters, I know where they're at and where they've been. I don't need to write everything out. But when it's a new series, I have to, like this first book in this series. I think the outline was 16,000 words because I had to list all the characters. I had to say where they were from and what their backstory was, and I had to give a background of the universe they're living in. Uh,
So it starts
and
looking like a series Bible in a
yeah,
sense.
it's like the world's not lived in yet, so I have to include all the details like this planet. Is it jungle? Does it have water? Does it have snow? What does it smell like? What are its seasons like? What animals live there? Just stuff that's gonna may not even come up in the book, but I need to know in my head before I write it.
Well, and these will be things in your writer toolkit that you get to, uh, you know, choose. You don't always use all the tools in your toolbox, but they're there, and when that job arises.
Exactly.
Yeah. My book, the one that I started in the fall, I'm just pulling up my Dabble project here. Three May Keep a Secret is I finished the first draft, and what I did is I took my plot grid and my outline, and I compared where I thought the story was going with where my first draft ended up, and I stayed the course in a lot of ways, but I've varied off as some new ideas presented themselves. So I started a separate outline because I wanted to um, really take my time on this revision process, especially since we were gonna do this uh, challenge together. And so I started making a separate outline based on what I had written and start comparing where I thought the original and where this wound up. And it has been really fruitful to um, allow me to conceptualize the story that I came up with kind of on a big scale, or like a 30,000-foot view of the story. And that's something I've never really done before. Really dissect my first draft and look at it. And, it gives you, it gives you some interesting opportunities to critically look at what you've created, and does it work? Can I see how all the plot points connect? And um, it's been a really interesting process for me. Um,
Very cool.
yeah, Josh, when you start revising, like when you realize that there were problems in book two that would need to be fixed back in book one. Um, how do you start that process? And where in the process do you start seeing those problems? Where do they pop up?
Well, for me, it was when I needed to start talking about the event, right? Like one of the characters, one of the main characters is a spy. The other one is a soldier, and they're both they've never met before, but they're coming at the same problem from different angles, and so there's a lot of conflict there because the soldier is still a soldier, and even though he's not technically attached to a military unit because of events, he still considers himself a soldier, and so he has to do things a certain way, and he believes that things should be done a certain way. The other guy's a spy. He's kind of a lone wolf. he doesn't have oversight. He doesn't have anybody to report to. He does his own thing. And so when they're coming at the same problem, the soldier is very regimented and very committed to the rules and things they can and can't do. And the spy is just like, bro, let's just go over here and do this thing. And so there's a lot of conflict there. But as they start to kind of uncover the mystery about what happened, a lot of those events started to kind of solidify in my mind where they were just kind of ethereal before. Like I said, like I was like, I know that this happened. It doesn't matter to me right now how or why. But now that I'm at that point, I've obviously got to figure it out. And so, and I do that with a lot of stuff in my books. Like for instance, I have one of the scenes in book one. The spy character Hawkins goes to a planet, and in the book it was just planet in brackets. There was nothing about it. It was planet, do something with this. And so in my first draft, I'm just writing, basically the base plot points. He goes here. The planet itself doesn't matter. What he does on the planet matters. So I didn't have to figure out any of the planet stuff. I was just like, go here and do this. And then as I went back to kind of piece the chapters together, I was like, okay, this is a good place to flesh this out. And so I spent a day kind of doing what Rick was talking about in his outline. Like, what is this planet? What's the backstory to the planet? Like, why are they the way that they are? I did very brief because the planet is not a huge set piece, but is a set piece. So you've got to do a little bit of work. But that's where a lot of those big details come in. And a lot of my second passes is where a lot of depth comes in, right? Because I know the characters better, I know the story better, I can imagine their backstories a little better, and so a lot of that kind of salt and pepper comes in after the fact. And so a lot of my rewrites is flavor and depth and layering on top of the straight plot.
Interesting. Jen had a comment. Jen said, I started a second outline too. I couldn't follow my plot points from the first draft, what I planned versus what actually happened. So I used the second outline for a bird's eye view of what happened. Exactly what I was just talking about, Jen. And I got that idea because Josh Hayes and I were having an argument 5 or 6 years ago about outlining, and he probably doesn't even remember the conversation. But Josh, you told me something that I have held on to ever since you told me, and you said everyone's an outliner. You just might outline after your first draft is finished, and that really, it was, you were being, kind of facetious when you said
Right,
it, but
right.
I took it to heart because I completely understood what you were saying. Yeah, you can kind of word vomit everything out there and then try to, take the pieces of what you've got and assemble a story.
Mm-hmm.
And the work has to be done. It's just, where are you going to do the work?
Right.
And so, yeah, Jen, I'm happy uh, that process has made sense to you as well. Rick, since you are such an elaborate outliner, what does your revision process usually look like? Like when you're finished with that first draft, what do you, in Stephen King's book on writing, he suggests taking that first draft, stick it in a desk drawer for 6 weeks or 2 months, go do something else, and then come back to it. Do you have the
Well,
luxury of,
Stephen King does an outline, which is probably why his endings
right?
suck so bad.
Yeah.
But for me, the outline really is kind of my first draft, especially with a new series. I
Yeah.
really go into detail. I mean, when I write the outline of the first book in a new series, I go down to things like bits of dialogue I want to throw in. So it really is kind of a really rough first draft.
Yeah.
So I don't generally revise it I read it over, and if I haven't made any obvious, continuity errors, then I turn it over to the editor, and they will tell me if there's any continuity or errors like that I missed. But as far as the actual plot of the book goes,
Yeah.
I catch anything that's not going to make sense or not going to flow. I catch that mostly in the outline. And if I don't catch in the outline, I will catch it in mid book, and I'll just say, this chapter doesn't feel right. And I'll go look at the outline and I'll make the correction right then. But I don't, once I've written the end on the book, there is no more plot revision for me unless, like I said, I missed something obvious where I have to put in a scene where somebody who's dead at the end died or alive at the end and have to take out that they died.
Now, is that a skill that that has become more prevalent, in writing? What are you up to now? 60 something books?
I am on my 62nd book right
Okay.
now.
It
And yes, it is. It's
Yeah, I'm
it
sure.
is something that I would not recommend for people just starting out at all.
Yeah.
But at some point, you do something often enough, then it just becomes kind of second nature.
Right.
Like a lot of people use I don't know if you've ever seen them. They use a chart with beats and story
Right.
beats on them,
Yep.
and the like 4-act structure or 6-act structure or 3-act structure, whatever structure you prefer, and they put their details in there to remind them. And when you're starting out, you need that, but eventually that just comes naturally. You're writing the outline and you realize, okay, yeah, this is the end of the first act, and this is the end of the second act, and that just happens. That just happens naturally for me. But when I first started out, um, trying to get traditionally published. I had an agent, and the agent put editors on me, and I wrote one draft after another of the 2 books that she had, which taught me what I needed to know about self-editing and revisions.
Um, is that confidence that just comes with putting the work in? Do you, looking back over your writing career, can you see where um where you started becoming more and more confident in your drafting skill
I
and
know
your
exactly when it.
outlining skills?
I know exactly when it happened.
Okay.
Actually, it was a very clear delineation. It was right after my 6th book, right around the 7th book, either the 7th or just after the 7th. I started to get that kind of confidence.
And was that just like, do you remember there being a particular thing that happened, or had you just
Well, I gradually turned from a seat of the pants writer into an outliner, and after book 7, in the process of writing book 7, I got good enough at outlining to where I could get those kind of things out in the outline. So
nice?
it took about 5 years of maybe 5 or 6 years of writing before I got to the point where I could do that.
Yeah, nice. Keo, did I understand right that the story you're working on is one that you started a few years ago?
Yep.
Or did you do anything in particular to refamiliarize yourself with the story, or kind of what the big concept ideas were when you started it, or what are you doing to kind of get back into the writing mode for this book?
Oh, I started like I reread the old draft and then, yelled at Pascal for being an idiot because, she is.
You
Nice.
guys need time machines so you can go back and slap yourselves in the past.
Yeah, no joke, man.
Yeah. I don't
Right.
think I should be allowed to have a time machine because then I might erase myself from existence.
Well,
Wouldn't
it
we
depends
all?
on which
Pascal
theory of time travel you believe.
Right.
Oh,
Is it Avengers Endgame theory or Back to the Future theory?
Are we basing our time
Ooh.
travel mission on hot tub time machine? I'd have to be careful about like when I like how angry I was at past self to do that because I could end up stabbing myself if it was like
Yeah, see,
like
exactly.
worst case scenario. Like, why would you do this, you idiot?
Right, right.
All right,
So
if we travel back in time, we got to make sure we don't have any type of weapons
Yeah,
or no access to
or
weapons
100%.
anything
or
that
Yeah,
can be considered a weapon.
yeah.
right.
Thinking more of a katana, Josh.
Oh, a katana. So I could hand it to myself and go seppuku right now. I wouldn't actually do that. But still, it's funny.
So Keo, what is your plan? Have you devised a plan for how you're going to attack this?
Oh yeah, I'm going to question my life choices, reread the draft again, then question my sanity, and again yell at Pasquio,
Hmm.
and then re-outline it, and then rewrite.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Rick, when you realized what a benefit outlining was, and when it proved fruitful in your life, when you could look at your output and say, well, this is a direct result of the way I've changed the way I write. Um, what did that? I guess I guess what I'm trying to ask is when you start a new project, how do you approach the outline? Do you do you start laying it out? This is where it's going to start. These are my characters. Do you kind of
the
start
first the first
painting
thing I
with
come up
broad
with
strokes?
the first thing I come up with is kind of a setting, not like a specific setting, but do I want this to be a near future story, where we get alien technology, or do I want it to be like 200 or 300 years in the future
Yeah,
and everything's different? Or, I get that first, and then I figure out what role do I want the main characters to be playing. What is it going to be? The young guy just stepping out into the world and experiencing an adventure to help him, you know, become an adult, or is it some grizzled veteran? What kind of a character do I want?
right.
And from there, I write usually a background, like this is the world that they live in. Which, if it's present day, I don't need to do that. But if it's a future thing, I write the background that happened, how the world came to be what it is, and then I'll write just a general synopsis, like telling somebody what the story's about. It's about this guy who does this, and this happens. Then I will go from there to a very, very detailed synopsis that's sometimes pages and pages long. And I will go from there to a chapter by chapter outline. And I'll start with like a couple of sentences for each chapter. And then I'll start fattening up those chapters. I think there's different people have different descriptions of that. I think they call it fat outlining or
Yeah.
something like that, or snowball. I don't know. Something like
Snowflake.
snowflake. Thank you.
How long does that process take you from from
For
first idea to now I'm ready to start writing the first draft?
for the first book in a series, it can take a couple of weeks. Um, if it's a later book in the series, I can do it in maybe 3 or 4 days because I already know all the stuff. But the preamble.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like you're rushing to get an outline done, or do you give yourself like this outline's going to take what it takes?
I never rush an outline. I write pretty fast,
Yeah.
and I am able to do that because I write detailed outlines. So if I rush an outline, that means that writing itself is going to come slower, and
Yeah.
it's just going to wind up slowing me down in the long run. So I try not to rush. I actually try to do outlines. Let's put this. I can write 2 books at the same time. I have written even 3, but I can never write an outline and anything else. If I'm writing an outline, I just write that outline the whole time. I don't write, outline in the morning and then do a book in the evening. I just write the outline until it's done. Because if I interrupt the flow of thoughts that go into that, then I will mess it up. I've tried that before. I just can't do it.
So it sounds like your outlining process is the part of the process where you really immerse yourself in the story.
Definitely, yeah.
The
I
drafting is
can,
actually just putting
yeah,
skin on the skeleton.
exactly. I can write books and watch TV. I can write books and listen to the radio. I can write books and talk to people, but I can't outline and do anything else. If I'm outlining, I have to have silence. I have to just do it.
Wow, wow. Josh, what about you? What is your outlining process? What does that usually look like? How long does it take? What do you do like Rick and start with these big concepts and then just drill down, you know, closer and closer?
I don't have one handy. I So I'm like completely opposite of Rick. I can I can outline anywhere at any time doing anything, but I have to have I have to be in the zone to get the writing done. Usually it takes me, so I usually handwrite my outlines on legal paper before I do any actual computer writing. I have, I don't know, 47 half used legal pads laying around the office because I use them, and then once I'm done planning and writing the book, I don't put anything else in that notepad. I just put it
Hey,
away. And yeah,
Josh, you know why I don't do that?
why?
Because I can't read my own handwriting.
Yeah. Well, there are some times
Same.
where I go and I look at it, I'm like, what the hell was I trying to say here?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like a doctor writing a prescription, but I outline very quickly. I can do a base outline by hand on paper in like 2 or 3 days, and then when I transfer it to the computer, that takes I don't know, 2 or 3 more, because as I'm typing in the outline, I'm adding things to it. I'm kind of like Rick, where if I think of a good line of dialogue, I'll put that in there. I'll put in like bits of conversation that I want the people to have, or if there's a specific description of something that I think in the outline, I'll add that into the mix too. So I mean, if that's all I'm doing that week, if I don't have any other work to do, I could spend a week and have a book outlined and ready to go. Generally speaking.
Nice. Um, Rick, Jen had a great question that I want to pose to you. She said, "When your outline is so detailed, does that help to keep your characters from running off doing their own thing?"
To some extent, I never word I'm looking for here is I never turn down a chance, or like if something comes to me and it's different from the outline, I don't just rule that out. I don't turn my nose up at it. If it, I'll try it out. I'll write the chapter with that in there and
Yeah.
see how it looks. And if it looks good, I'll keep it. So I mean, it's very very rare that I will delete a whole chapter, but usually I will know at the time, like when I start to write this, like, oh yeah, this guy, I like Drop Trooper 12 or 11, sorry, the book before last, the one that just got released. There was a character who was going to die at the end of book 12, and I killed him at the end of book 11 because I'm like, it doesn't make sense for him to die in that way. It's not as dramatic, it's not as meaningful. This is like the place where he would sacrifice himself. So I just did it, and luckily it worked because really didn't want to delete the whole chapter. But
Well, that's an interesting problem because you know, kind of unlike the problem that Josh is dealing with, where a problem that presents itself then causes problems in the past. This seems like it caused a problem for the future for you, that you had planned for this to happen then. So it's a whole lot easier to change your future plan than it is to go back and
oh,
revise a
that has
previous
happened
book.
over and over.
Yeah,
Writing a long series like Drop Trooper, it's 12 books now.
right.
There have been so many times because you have to understand this originally was going to be a trilogy. And then I
So
said,
much
well,
for
can
that.
can I make it 4 books? Because I feel like I need 4 books to end this war. And then, of course, it did well. So the publisher's like, you need to write more books. So I had to come up with total new plot lines. And now I'm like, I think I am starting my 4th different story arc in this series. So when you're writing 4 book arcs, and the way I do it is I have like a very general arc outline, very very general. I don't like writing detailed arc outlines. So I'll take that and I'll split it up into each book and I'll do the book and I'm like, this really exciting cool thing was supposed to be in the next book, but this book is starting, as I'm outlining it, I'll say this is starting to feel a little like filler. So I better take this exciting thing from the next book and put it in this book. And then when I start to do the outline for the next book, then I got to come up with some other exciting thing, which can be a pain in the butt. Speaking of going back and kicking future me's, I mean, past me's butt.
Right.
But you got to do it because nobody wants to read a filler novel. They want the cool stuff to be right there.
Yeah. Next week I want to talk about character motivations and how to look at your characters that you've written and see if they're fulfilling the purpose that you originally intended for them to fulfill, and are they doing their job, so to speak. But I feel like we've talked a lot about identifying problems with your plot, but do you ever look back when you've got that first draft, look back on it and see that characters are not who you hope that they would be, or they're not performing the job that you set out for them to do? And how do you start looking at our characters developing the way that you want them to? Keo, when you look at something that you've written, what do you do, or what are you hoping to do if you identify a character that's just seems flat, or is not as dynamic as you hope that they would be, or just doesn't live up to what you thought their potential would be?
Um, I think it would depend on how relevant they are to the plot, because I could always just axe them,
Yeah.
but we'll see, because I might stumble across that problem real soon.
Yeah. Well, if you're like me, you definitely will stumble across it, and characters will need to be massaged and give
I've had the
them.
problem in the past, and I think I gave in my main project, I have one character who I had and then just stopped using for a while. They
Yeah.
kind of just disappeared. And so I have to give them something to do. So I kind of gave them a bigger role. And now they're actually more prevalent to the plot.
Gotcha. Sam said, Keo, is your project going to be a full novel or stay a short story?
I have it planned to be a full novel. We'll see.
Awesome.
Watch me turn into a series, because that happens.
My short story is now a series.
I kid you not. I planned I have a standalone plan. I had a standalone plan. It turned into a trilogy.
That happens a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens a lot.
More often than you would think. Yeah.
Ask
Drop
Rick
Trooper
Cartwright.
Drop Trooper was a short story.
Was it really? And now it's
Yes.
12 novels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Josh, what do you do if you identify a character that's not living up to their potential?
I guess it really just depends on what I need the character to do, right? Or you mentioned if the character's flat, or if they're not, just shining on the screen. And I know every character doesn't need something. Every character doesn't need a spotlight. But if you're using secondary characters that are on screen a lot, you want to make sure that you're doing them justice as well as the main character. And you also don't want characters that are just feeding easy buttons to your protagonist, right?
Right.
So a lot of thing I like to do, and a lot of this happens in my second draft, is I will figure out more about the characters as I write them. For instance, one of the characters, Rick mentioned killing off a character a book early. I killed off a character like half a book early in book 2 of Weaponized, where I had planned to kill this dude off in like the finale of the book. And then in the opening sequence of the inciting incident, I killed him off. and I was like, oh, well, I guess he's out of the rest of the book. So now I've got to go back and make sure that his parts are covered by somebody else. But and I wrote the entire book 1, not really kind of thinking about those characters. I was more focused on the main characters. And then when I went back in to kind of do the edits, I realized one of the things that I needed to do was give these other 2 characters more depth. And so one of the characters I made not like proselytizing religious, but like practicing religious. And so I took out all of his curses. I put in some prayers here and there, like not overly so, but just enough to set him apart from everybody else. And I'm sorry, it looks like my glasses are like sideways on my face, but it's not. It's just my camera. I promise my glasses don't look like this. It's like my webcam. It's freaking me out.
Actually, I thought your head
Maybe
was
your head's
sideways.
just
My
crooked.
head's tilted. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll just talk like this for the but yeah, so I go through and I'll the plane make sure that they're talking correctly, make sure that they're doing functional things, and just make sure they're not boring, man.
Yeah.
Like one of the characters who is the non-commissioned officer, the non-com, the sergeant that works with the main character who's a captain. I hadn't really done a whole lot with him in book 1. And so in book 2, I kind of have him as the push point to make Logan, who's the main character, make him take the necessary steps to get where I need them to be. Because, like I said, he's a soldier, so he's really reluctant to do some of the things that they all know that they need to do. And so this character, Pavlovich, is his drive for, or his purpose for this book is to push him in that direction. And so I'm flavoring a lot of the scenes so that it's not overly like, hey, please go do this, but he's doing it through like subtext. He's doing it through little small nudges. So by the time he does the big push, it's there and it's set and people understand what he's trying to do. But a lot of that happens honestly through the second draft and through rewrites, because the first draft for me, like I'm like Rick, I outline a whole bunch, but I don't typically outline a lot of character stuff. A lot of that comes after. So I do a lot of character realization as I'm writing, and sometimes I have an idea that I think the character is going to be this, and then as I'm writing them, and it's kind of like people don't understand when authors say my characters aren't doing what I want them to do. Well, they don't sometimes. And sometimes they turn into completely different people. Like I had you this person and you became this person. First of all, good on you, because you're way better than I am. I could have created, and I don't know where you came from, but okay, let's go do this thing. That's my characters are all mostly just realized after the fact.
Nice. Rick, have you ever finished a draft and had a character that you just didn't like or just didn't show up in the way that you thought they would?
I don't recall ever having that happen. Usually, I can tell in the outline if somebody's not getting enough stuff to do.
Yeah.
Because if somebody's not getting enough stuff to do, then I just write them out. I'll just take their character out, or barely mention them in the book, not make them a main character. So back when I was writing, by the seat of my pants, I don't think I ever had a character do too little, but I've often had characters that totally took over the book and I had not meant them to. But it's very rare that I have one that I had to like kill off or write out. I'm kind of minimalist when it comes to characters. If
Yeah.
if if somebody doesn't have enough to do, then they're going to be in the background and nobody's going to talk to them.
Yeah. Well, Josh mentioned this, and I've heard Brandon Sanderson talk about it a time or three before about um, sometimes that you'll outline the plot but leave the characters um, sort of pantsable, so that you kind of discover the characters as you write them. But if you take that sort of approach, is there ever um, the temptation that the characters then become something that affects the plot, and then your plot starts to change because your characters have changed too much? Is that something that you have to worry about?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't worry about it. I kind of enjoy it when that happens.
Yeah.
Because because nothing for me as a writer, the readers I know don't feel this way.
Yeah.
Just through experience, I found that they don't feel this way. But as a writer, nothing is more fun for me than having a character that just takes off and does something I hadn't planned on.
Yeah.
That is just awesome. I had a villain do that in my first series that I wrote. Uh, it was supposed to be like a minor, not even a villain, more like a kind of a bureaucrat that was incompetent and inefficient, but just a minor character. And I put his name in as a joke for a message forum that I used to hang out with, because they used to have this guy who had gotten really mad at another member and called their work and tried to get them fired.
Oh
So
no.
everybody had like when they would hold up signs and pictures that said "F you," that guy's screen name. So I so so I turned his screen name into changed a little bit to make it a last name, and I put "F you" that name in the book just as a
That's
joke.
amazing.
And then he became
So is this
the
art
master.
imitates reality,
Yeah,
or
he
Yeah.
well he
some
became
reality
he
imitating?
became a mastermind villain in this book. He was the one who had caused all the bad stuff that had happened in the last two books. He was like the mastermind behind it. And I had not intended that when I started I hadn't intended that when I started book 2, and I
Yeah.
certainly hadn't intended it when I introduced him really as a character at the beginning of book 3. But by the middle of book 3, I knew. I'm like, well, hold on here. The way that I have things set up, just pantsing along,
Yeah.
there has to be somebody who was pulling the strings for a bunch of this stuff to have happened in these two books. Because I originally intended it to be somebody else, but I'm like, no, he's doing this stuff over here, but somebody's got to be doing this. And I'm like, well, this guy's the only character I've introduced who was in a position to do any of that. So he became the main villain for the book, for the series almost.
Nice.
Nice. So I could see where that could affect future books coming up. You start thinking about, oh, okay, now I see how this story could go this way. But has it ever changed the book that you're writing so much that you had to alter your outline?
Not in the outline, no. I don't know. I mean, I don't think that I've ever had a character after I started outlining change quite enough that I had to like totally change the plot of the book. Sometimes I would make a tiny adjustment, like one character was gonna perform an action later in the book, but this person's become so important that they do it instead. But it's not like I have to change the ending of the book or anything. Make a minor adjustment maybe.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, guys, this has been a fruitful hour. I think next week we're gonna dig in depth about character motivations, and seeing if the characters that you have wound up with after your first draft meet the expectations of when you began, and what to do about characters that kind of get out of line. But that
Smack 'em
should be, yeah,
Yeah.
smack them around. So from me, Josh Hayes, Rick Partlow, and Keo, thanks for joining us. We will be here again next week, same time, same Dabble station. And thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.